Hey, are you suspicious?
Why do you ask?
You look suspicious.
Why do you say?
Today, we're going to be talking about suspicion and how it affects us personally in our Christian walk and others. But before we get into that, my name is Kathy Pollard. With me is your other host, Carla Moore, and we are looking up a podcast for Christian women. And our objective each week is just to gather and talk and hopefully encourage everybody who's joining us and listening in. We thank you for being here and hope that you'll find this uplifting and encouraging. If you ever have feedback for us, we welcome that. If you ever have topic ideas, we welcome that too. And we also invite you to join us to our Facebook page, Looking Up with Kathy and Carla, where we typically share little things that we talked about during the episode and have a great community of Christian women over there. So, Carla, I'm liking how our shirts look side by side.
Yeah, we didn't even
Looks
call each
good,
other.
doesn't it?
We coordinate.
We didn't. Yeah.
We're
How are
extra.
you doing? You just got back home.
Yeah, we've been back a few days. We got back on Saturday, and this is Wednesday, so we are back in the Central Time Zone, and it was a good trip. We got to see lots of our favorite people and have budget meetings were not fun. Bible passages, because Brian is up there and he works with us now, and so we had to do a lot of financial planning and meetings, and I don't know what it is about that, but even just the sound of those words altogether gives me a stomach ache.
Yuck.
It's never fun, but it was necessary. So we did
Hmm.
that, and John spoke in chapel, and we had lots of time with friends, and so it was good. We were glad to go, and always glad to be home too.
Yeah. Was it gorgeous over there?
It was. We went up the very last day before we went to catch our flight out. We went up to I don't remember the name of it, but it was up not Evergreen, one of those other little areas in that direction. I can't remember, but drove up about 8,000 feet and just walked around for about an hour. And it was a gorgeous trail. We had never, John had never been there before, but Brian knew where it
Mm.
was. And so we just kind of did a little bit of a hike, and I huffed and puffed my way around there. And man, you really realize how out of shape you get when you're at altitude and climbing hills and trying to
Mm.
trying to talk at the same time just doesn't. It's like you realize, slap in the face. It's time to get yourself in shape again.
Yeah. I can almost smell it though. There's nothing like it. I love that smell
Yeah. And we were
up at the top
realizing
of the
that
mountains.
we had we are rarely there in March. We go home when we were there back and forth. We would go home usually early to mid March. So late March for us is kind of a new springtime. It was really really pretty. Enjoyed it.
Mm. Hmm. Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
Hey, I
Um,
want to say something
okay.
because I was gone last week and we didn't get all of our mail. So I got mail when I got home, and I got this thing called a Tiny Spark in the mail,
Mhm.
and it was so much fun. Whoever is
Yay.
not part of this Tiny Spark, kind of a little, it's not a pen pal club because we don't necessarily write you back, although you wouldn't object to it, I'm sure, if we wrote you back.
I've gotten two letters back.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a lot of, it was just so much fun to unwrap it, and I loved the watercolor that you did.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank
I'm
you.
hanging on to that, and for sure. And these little cards, one is a memory verse and one is a prayer prompt. What a great idea for to have a prayer prompt like that. And then this beautiful Band-Aid and these
For
fun
clumsy types.
stickers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a story from you that was so much fun to read. And I could just hear you talking while I was reading it. It's like I read it in your voice. And there's a hymn highlight and some jokes. And, it was a little bit of a dad joke, but it was funny. A meow chain. It was cute, yeah. And then this interview with Christy Huntsman, which I have saved that. I have not finished it yet. I haven't clicked on or done the QR code yet to read the full thing yet. But
Hmm.
I was so excited to get home just because of that, because I knew it was waiting on me in the mailbox. So well done. That's lots of fun.
Thanks. Thanks for
So
the shout out. I appreciate
we,
that.
did we already link that in the group last week
I
or?
think I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when I first mentioned it on here, I shared the link.
So how many people do you have subscribed now?
I think we're at about 207 right now.
Pretty awesome. That's neat.
Hmm.
What a great
Yeah.
idea. That was very thinking outside the box and original and fun. Who doesn't like getting snail mail? Anyway, going to the mailbox and getting something fun, but to get something from a friend and little fun surprises in there. I know that was a lot of work, but I really enjoyed it. So thanks for doing
Well,
that.
it's fun work though. It's fun and
Mhm.
I've had a lot of fun putting April's together. It's so exciting and I'm really enjoying it. And I've seen it wasn't my idea originally because I've seen like mail clubs that have to there's one called Letters from Afar
Yeah.
that features a unique place in the earth,
Yeah.
and then I've seen one that is it's almost like a novel or something that you subscribe to, and every time your envelope shows up, you get another piece of the story.
Hmm.
So I'd seen the idea before, but I thought, how fun would it be to do one for Christian women with just like little fun things in there, and
Yeah. I loved it.
so
I loved it.
thank you.
Lots of
I'm
fun.
so glad.
Yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So. Well, we had quite the weekend here. Our oldest grandson ended up going to the ER and then being medevaced to Vanderbilt, which because he got a hold of something toxic, and so that was pretty scary. But he had follow-up labs today, and everything is good. They got it in time. They got to him in time, and we're grateful for that. And then also Neil had a gnarly case of bursitis that turned to cellulitis in his knee. So he has been
He's laid up.
down and out. He is down for the count.
And that's not
And
normal for him at all, is
that
it?
is, I think the worst part of it for him is not being able to run because I can't even remember. I mean, like COVID doesn't keep him from running. He
Mhm.
just, no matter what, he's going to run, but he literally cannot run. And so, um, finally, yesterday was the first day that he actually stayed home to keep his leg elevated like he was supposed to from the beginning. And it's actually made a difference, but he was not a very cheerful patient. He was like, "Ah, this is for the birds."
Yeah.
Just absolutely not it is not
Mhm.
him. He doesn't enjoy that very much,
See, and I'm
but it
thinking
looks like he's on the mend.
if something was wrong with me, I'm like, "Phew, this means I don't have to run.
Exactly.
Not that I run anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it was so our week, like everything just, this whole week did not go at all according to plan. And that's fine. I just want everybody that I love to be okay.
Oh.
But
Well, did
anyway,
Rich, was he feeling okay? Like, was he even able to maybe enjoy that medevac, or was he miserable?
I don't know about that part.
I just
I don't
think
know.
for a 3-year-old, he might have been
Yeah,
feeling
I know that Emily got to hop in the helicopter with him and Carl had to follow.
that. Hmm.
And I assumed that we would be keeping their other kids, but they were already with some friends of theirs for some reason. I don't know why. And their dad is a firefighter, and he had heard what was going on, and he was like, "Just leave them here; they're fine."
Hmm.
And then on Sunday, after Neil went ahead and preached, and we kind of assumed we'd either be heading to Nashville or going to pick up their kids. We weren't sure how the afternoon was going to play out, but um, pretty right away after worship, we heard they're going to discharge us soon. We're about to be discharged. Now, it ended up taking longer than we thought,
Yeah.
but it just, they really know what they're doing at Vanderbilt and they got him on the IV. He was actually treated locally and then again at Vanderbilt. And I think that helped it, you know, it was really scary. It was really scary. I'm trying to protect their privacy and not give away
Sure.
too many
Yeah.
details, but it was
Mhm.
an
Yeah,
eventful week. So,
it sounded scary. Well, I wanted to mention another thing if you're done with that.
yeah. Hmm.
So, my friend Evelyn Alexander sent this to me,
That's
and
beautiful.
it's the Pocket Bible devotional for women, and it's I haven't gotten into it very much yet because it just came a couple of days ago. Evelyn, I know she listens to the podcast, so hello, Evelyn, and she's just a dear woman. She's been on 2 different trips with us, and she lives in North Carolina, in Cary, North Carolina, and I just wanted to say thanks, Evelyn, and give her a little shout out because I know that she enjoys the podcast, but she's just such an encouragement. She's one of those people that she'll always sign her letters, love and hugs, Evelyn, and I can just hear her saying it. So she's one of those
Oh,
people that I always think I want to be like her when I get older. So thanks, Evelyn.
very sweet.
Yeah,
Very sweet.
yeah.
Well, speaking of listeners, I got a message from somebody yesterday. Beth Burmeister messaged me and said that she's doing your scripture reading. And at the same time, she's also reading through the chronological Bible,
Mhm.
which she heard me talk about on here. And she said yesterday, which at the time of this recording was March 31st, the verses were the same.
Whoa,
Yeah. So she showed
crazy.
me a pic. I'll share it in the group. She sent a picture of the verses that she wrote for your scripture writing, and then she highlighted the verses that she was reading for that day's chronological reading, and were the exact same thing.
Wow.
Yeah. So
What's the
it
odds?
was First Samuel 17 verses 40 and following. Is that not cool?
So funny. Wanted to mention if you're done with that, I found some fun things at the thrift store. Have you ever seen Jim Shore stuff?
I know, those are
I
adorable.
love Jim Shore, and it's their wooden, just little figurines. And I don't do
Wait,
a
let
whole
me.
lot of. They're caroling. Can you see?
Is
It
he
looks like he's throwing
American
up.
or something else?
Is he American? Yeah, he's American. It's Jim
Okay.
Shore.
Yeah, I don't know who
So
that is.
he does a lot of different holidays and things. This happens to be Christmas, and like I said, I don't collect a whole lot of little tchotchkes, but I just love the colors. And I
Hmm.
found this. They were $4.99 each, and it was Senior Citizen Day.
You qualify?
So 55 at Goodwill. If you're 55, you qualify.
Really?
Yeah. So I got both of them for like $7. So that's my thrifting find for the week.
Let me get this straight. I have a friend who's senior citizen. Uh,
And you're not far behind, Missy.
I'm not.
Yeah, you're about there. In fact,
Wow.
isn't that next month
No,
or
not
the month after
55.
next?
I'll be 54
Oh,
in May.
okay. Well, you have a whole year to go then
Yeah,
before you can
haha.
get your senior citizen discount at Goodwill. I think there's a lot of things that open up at 55. In fact, maybe that's something we should put out in the group next week and see what all discounts can you get where
Yeah.
when you're 55.
I can't remember if I mentioned on here or not, but recently Neil was driving back from a trip and he drove by one of those senior living community, like the neighborhood, the no children allowed kind of neighborhoods
Yeah.
that you live in. And he said, I qualify for that community because it said for residents 55 and up.
Yeah. Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
It's
Ah,
not bad so
ah,
far.
time to party. All the fun things are starting to come our way.
Senior citizen communities.
That's right. Oh,
We
wow.
had the only other thing, I was two other things. We are literally, today is the day we were going to get home from Israel. So
Oh.
man, like it was a whole month. We were going to be there almost an entire month. And it
Yeah.
feels like it's been a long time since we were talking about leaving. And all of this time
Hmm.
we would have been in Israel. So for some
Wow.
reason in my calendar, I still have these things popping up telling me that your flight departs at 4:30 a.m. And
Oh.
so I think we would be getting home in about an hour from now. So, whew,
Mm.
glad
Well, I'm
glad things
sorry
are
it turned out
holding
the
up.
way it did, but I'd
Yeah,
rather you be safe.
for sure. And the only
Mm.
other thing I was going to mention is that we tried Peruvian food last week in Denver. Have you ever had Peruvian food? No, that
I
doesn't
don't.
sound very likely of me. It was because I wasn't given a choice.
I
But
bet it
it
was
was good.
good.
It was good. It was kind of a mixture of Asian and Mexican, and I don't know. It had all those different flavors. It was spicy. Brian ordered fried plantain, and I can't remember some kind of meat. It kind of looked like beef and broccoli. That's what it
Is this
looked
that
like.
place north of the
The Red
school?
Llama. It
Huh?
was. It was in. No, it was the name of it's Red Llama, and it
Oh,
was
I haven't
in.
been there.
I can't remember the name of the community, but it wasn't in anywhere near the school.
I haven't heard of that one yet.
Yeah. And John had. Oh, I should have remembered to look it up, but it was good. I had like
Hmm.
a roasted chicken and potatoes, and they had all these little sauces to dip in, and it was. And then we had some churros for dessert, and they were really good.
Yum.
So anyway, if you're anywhere near the Red Llama in Colorado,
I like the
check it
name. That's
out.
cute.
Yeah, it
That's
was
really
very
cute.
authentically decorated. So give it a
Yeah.
try.
We started going to this little Cuban place north of the school right before we moved. That was good.
Pretty spicy, isn't it?
Not too bad.
No, I think
Mm-mm.
of Cuban as being spicy. Maybe it's just their personalities. I don't know if I like this side by side because I can't take a drink of my drink without anybody seeing me.
I know. So in the last episode, you had me bawling through the whole thing. And then afterwards, you followed up with a text, "Hey, it's side by side." And I thought, oh
Great.
no, of all times.
We've been trying to, and it was the one time that you spent your time crying through it.
Yeah.
It's
You
okay.
know what, though? I think that episode really resonated with a lot of people. I've seen a lot of shares, a lot of comments, and I told Neil afterwards that everything that you said was just absolutely beautiful and powerful, and it was a really good episode.
And it came straight out of the Word of God, so it has that has power, doesn't it? I needed
Yeah.
it. I needed to think
Yeah.
about it and focus on it myself.
Yeah. It was good. It was good. All right. Anything else before we hop in? I have an invalid upstairs, so I have to. I told him I'd keep it tight.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Go for it.
So we're talking about being suspicious today, and I noticed that you saw the same article that I did because my quote this morning came from that article, and you said I just read that, and I don't even remember what I was looking into, but ran across this article um, called "Assume the Best of Others: Resilient Love in an Age of Suspicion." It's by Greg Morse. I don't know anything about him, I don't, so I'm not. I don't know anything about him. Let me just say that.
It's on the
But
Desiring God website, and they have a lot of good
yes,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and but the article itself was so good. I read the whole thing out loud to Neil and just really resonated with me and some of the things that I think that we can struggle with. And I thought it would be a great topic today. So I thought the first thing we would talk about is why are we so suspicious? And I'm just going to word it that way because I feel like probably most of us struggle with that in some way, whether it's with our own spouse or with other people. And I think a few reasons that came to mind to me is the first of all, we kind of live in an artificial world now.
Mm.
We're learning to be suspicious and to question everything. Is that real? Did they really say that? Is that really what they look like? Is that really their writing? Is that really their artwork? Is that, because it could be theirs, it could be AI. Who knows? We just live and is it filtered out or is that what they really look like? It's just
Yeah.
we're kind of making some assumptions now. This could be legit or this could be fake. And you kind of have to approach things with a little bit of suspicion to find out before you take something at face value
Mm-hmm.
because of the way the direction things are going. And along those lines, it sort of starts feeling like nothing can be trusted. There's fake news, fake pictures, all that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing. And then I thought another reason we could be suspicious could be a personal heart problem, struggling with self righteousness or a very judgmental type approach to other people or that kind of attitude. We have an easy time seeing the flaws in others, almost as if that's what we're looking for. That's what we spend our time doing is looking for things that we can call out.
Yeah.
Um, and Matthew 7:1 conversation, the whole judge not that you be not judged is this idea of why are you so focused in on this little speck of somebody else's and not dealing with the big log in your own eye. So that's another reason. A third reason could be past hurts.
Yeah.
And we understand that, if you've been in a relationship and you've been disappointed or betrayed, and it changes you, and maybe you have a hard time letting that go, learning to trust, and so you approach even people that you love dearly with this measure of suspicion. So that could be a reason. And then the last reason I thought of was just exposure, because now more than ever we see more and more of what's going on in the world. So there's a lot of negative things to see out there that is coming in at us 24/7, and think about a generation ago that didn't have access to all of that and wasn't inundated with all of that. And I think it affects us. I think it affects our psyche and how we view the world and all those things that we're taking in. So just to start out with, why do we wrestle with this sometimes? I think it could be a variety of reasons. And some of them we can control and some of them we probably can't. But I do believe it can become a heart problem
Hmm.
and a joy sapper, as we're going to learn here in a minute. And it's something that we probably need to pray about, look honestly at our own hearts, and then figure out how to address.
And the first thing that he brought up in that article that I noticed is that he noticed that his wife, who used to be, full of joy and spontaneous and quick wit and fun, started to slowly change, and he wanted to know why. And then he realized that he was making her that way because of his own cynicism and suspicion. And so, along with those reasons you were talking about, I'm thinking that it can be taught, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And I think in his part, what he was saying is that he didn't mean for it to affect her that way or anyone else. But I think that we can easily be influenced by others to be suspicious, or even taught to be that way. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
our parents are, tend to be more suspicious or cynical or whatever word you want to use there. And so
Mm-hmm.
they teach their kids to look out for number one, or to make sure you're not getting taken. And I think that we are easily taught, and maybe don't even realize that we're being taught that we should be suspicious, or we should suspect that, or think that someone's out to get us, or to take
Mm-hmm.
us for all we're worth, or whatever word you want to use there. So I just think also that we need to be careful that we're not influenced that way, and that we're not the ones doing the influencing to be so suspicious.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to mention that too. He started out the article with that example of noticing the change in his wife, and then it finally dawned on him that he was the cause of it.
Mhm.
And he said that cynicism and suspicion crawl into our minds and make us traitors to ourselves, dangers to our families, and toxins to our churches. Our suspicions can make us strike at those dearest to us. They contain a self fulfilling prophecy. The more we suspect, the more reasons we find to suspect. The more we distrust, the more reasons we find to distrust, and every creak of the floor becomes a burglar.
Mm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, um, when you think about if you call somebody out as being suspicious, or if you mention somebody's name, so and so is such a suspicious person. I don't know about you, but I picture a face. When I think of somebody having, I'm not saying a specific person, but yeah, that face. When I think of somebody that they're just so suspicious or they have a suspicious nature, you
Hmm.
can almost picture that, kind of
Yeah.
snarl, squinty eyed, like cut your eyes off to the side, and it is just not an attractive face.
Hmm.
It is not a pleasant face. And even if in our suspicion we veil it and we keep it on the inside, if our facial features can become distorted in an unattractive way, imagine what happens to our own heart
Hmm.
when we allow it to sink into our heart and what it looks like to God. And so it's not a beautiful thing. It's not a pleasant thing. And what I loved about this article is he keeps contrasting that with this spirit of the world versus this Christ-like spirit.
Hmm.
It's the spirit of the world that is suspicious.
Hmm.
It's the Christ-like spirit that gives the benefit of the doubt. And he keeps drawing this beautiful contrast that makes you see, I've been there and I have felt that way and I've thought that way, but that is not Christ-like at all, nor is it attractive.
Exactly.
So it's very well written. And a couple of the areas that it really becomes a problem, first of all, is in our homes. Now, this could be any relationship in the home. I'm just going to talk about the marriage one because I think that's the easiest one. But, for those listening in, depending on your circumstances, you may not be married, but this can be a poison, a toxin in your own home that's a danger to you and other people that are exposed to it. But imagine it not building up your marriage, not promoting closeness or strengthening togetherness, but instead something that pulls you apart and taints what God has in mind for the relationship. And again, it could be that something has happened. There's been some hidden thing came to light, some kind of betrayal or some kind of sin or some kind of hurt. Everybody's got stuff in their marriages. And so if you have chosen to forgive, which we're supposed to do, and move on, then the choice becomes ours of how we're going to proceed from there, how we're going to treat our spouse. And again, I don't want to get bogged down into the whole conversation of, blind trust or, this is not what this episode is about. It's about suspicion, and that's our part. And, how it hurts our relationship. But when we have a suspicious nature with our spouse, that means we're treating them as if they're guilty until proven innocent. And that's going to come across in our body language, in our words. It's when we allow ourselves to get worked up into being mad over nothing. Have you ever been perfectly fine and then one little thought planted itself into your head about your husband? I know you haven't, Carla.
No, never.
I know you haven't. But one little
Hey.
thought, he's probably, and, he's not even home. But because that thought planted itself in your mind and you fed it, and then by the time
Mhm.
he gets home, you are so mad and so worked up and so determined that you are right and he's wrong and he's,
He's
and
clueless.
he has no idea what he's fixing to walk into.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have decided he's guilty. And one of the ways the author words it in that article is that we end up treating those perceived sins as severely as we do obvious sin.
Mhm.
A suspicious nature is going to treat it just what they think that you might be guilty. They're making some assumptions, and so then they act as if you are
Yeah.
and treat it just as severely. Um, it causes problems in our church families. If you're one who questions the motivation of your church leaders, why are they doing what they're doing, or what you think they should or shouldn't be doing, or other people, your brothers and sisters in Christ, perceived slights from others, whether it's via text, which, man, because
Yeah.
you can't hear tone or see body language, all that's been removed, how hard it is and how easy it is to make some assumptions that can be way off base.
Mhm.
Um, Suspicion of our fellow brothers and sisters out in the world, not just our church families now, but out there, mostly because of what we see online. You
Mhm.
know, did you see what they wrote? Did you see what he preached? Did you see what they said? Did you see? And all of a sudden, here's the line in the sand, and I'm labeling you. And, I think it just feeds this divisiveness and suspicious nature, and that is not what we're supposed to be about.
Mhm.
We're supposed to love instead. So, um, unless you have something you want to say about what I just said.
Well, it made me think of one particular time, and I think I even told you about it when I was on my way home from somewhere. And it'd been a long day. I don't remember what I'd been doing, but I was on my way home and I was thinking, what are we going to have for dinner? And, you know, I wonder if John's even thought about what we're going to have for dinner. And why am I always the one that has to think of what's for dinner? Why can't he come up with something that's for dinner? And I bet he hasn't even thought about it. And, it would have been so easy for him to stop and get a rotisserie chicken. And why didn't he do that? And I mean, I was literally, by the time I recognized what was happening about 10 minutes from home, and I started like mentally shaking myself. But that seed, I'd already planted that seed, not trusting him, or being suspicious of him. And I know there's more to
Mm-hmm.
it than that. But I worked myself up and I was furious when I got home. Even though I
Yeah.
realized what was happening, it was like I had lost control of my, I don't know, my sanity. But I don't know. There was one other thing that I thought of when you were talking about that saying, to search your own heart, what paineth thee in others in thine own self may be.
Mm-hmm.
And so suspicion, there's another thing that I think of is, you can't kid a kidder, and how
Mm-hmm.
people who are always joking, you can't really pull a joke over on them because they're always assuming that you're joking. And so if you're a suspicious person, then you are suspicious that someone else is suspicious of you, and it's just like it's a vicious cycle that we have to be aware of. And so I'm glad you're talking about this, because I think a lot of us are just not even aware that this is a problem. It's just one of those things that maybe it kind of flies under the radar of character flaws that we have. So it's a good thing to be aware of.
Well, it reminds me of the exact opposite of rose-colored glasses. So
Mhm.
whatever colored glasses those would be, that's what the suspicion, instead of viewing everything from a positive angle or giving people the benefit of the doubt, it's just already going in there with that assumption that you're up to something and it's not good. And you've seen in relationships, it's usually presented via jealousy. Because I've got a problem with jealousy, then I'm suspicious, and you are, doing this or that, or letting this person do this, or and it's just a poison. And even the Bible says concerning jealousy, who can stand against it?
Mhm.
It is that deadly, and it taints everything. And I think suspicion does the same thing. And is it, I already mentioned the self righteousness, but could it be in some sense self protectiveness? If I get out ahead of it, then I can't be hurt.
Mhm.
Maybe that's at the root of it if we're talking about a close relationship with somebody. Is it a need to feel more righteous or better than somebody by calling out perceived problems of other people that you might see online? I don't know. Whatever the root of it is, it's a weed, and it needs to be pulled,
Mhm.
and can create so much damage, not just for the people around us, but our own personal peace and joy. And and how we feel about ourselves affects how we treat other people. And I think that if somebody is viewing everybody else through the lens of suspicion, there's something going on in their own life, that needs to be dealt with.
Mhm.
All right, so how do we love instead? First of all, just assume the best. That should be the default position. Assume the best, even with somebody who's given you reason to be suspicious.
Right.
And I think that goes back to Jesus' teaching on forgiveness. And Peter says, what if my brother comes and sins against me 7 times in a day? How many times do I have to forgive him? And Jesus's answer shows you're not keeping track.
Yeah.
You're keeping a heart of grace and forgiveness.
Mhm.
And I think it's the same thing. The practicing of the golden rule, when Jesus says in Matthew 7:12, treat others the way you want to be treated. Um, so many times I skip over the first two words of that verse, which is in everything.
Mhm.
It says, in everything, treat others the way you want others to treat you. But that's not convenient for me sometimes, and but I need to assume the best. If we have a hard time with that, I've allowed myself to develop this cynical personality or nature, or whatever it is, and I have a hard time assuming the best. I think one thing that can help is start talking about people as if you're assuming the best in them. Let your speech sound like you're giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. Even if you're not feeling it, talk about other people in the very best way. I love how they do this, or they must think this, or and put a positive spin on it,
Yeah.
because I think saying the words makes it easier for us to start thinking that way, and we're also training ourselves to look at other people that way instead of through that suspicious lens, um, and want what's best for others. If we have that Philippians 2 others first mindset, and we want what's best for others, we're not going to be suspicious. Think about parents with their kids. We want what's best for our kids, and sometimes that means we have a hard time seeing things we need to see Because no, they wouldn't do that. There must be a reason. Surely they were just, and we come up with all these reasons and explanations and excuses because we love them so much and we want what's best for them and we're willing to give them the benefit of the doubt until we absolutely can't anymore.
Hmm.
And really, that's how it should be with everybody. You know, we should want what's best for them to the point that we have to be extremely convinced to believe otherwise.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure that's not natural, but
Mm-mm.
that's the Christ-like way. That's the spirit of Christ. Were
You're
you gonna
talking
say
about
something?
rose-colored glasses. I'm thinking that maybe the opposite is blinders. You have on blinders, and
Yeah.
how if you have on the kind of blinders, the suspicious blinders, then you don't see any of the good. All you're looking for is the negative, or what to be cynical about, or what's how somebody's been out to get you. But on the other hand, they can also have blinders on to not see the bad. Maybe you have blinders
Mhm.
on to block out all of the bad, and you just see the good. And you know, we're human, so we're
Mhm.
not going to be able to see all of the good all of the time. We can train our minds to work on it, but it's a pretty tall order to think that we can block out all of the negative and to to always uh, to always see the good and the best in people. But it's something that we can aspire to do and work on and do our best to be better at.
Yes, absolutely. And I've kind of debated whether or not to bring this up, but I'm going to go ahead. Sometimes we get put in a position where we're exposed to Christians more than we used to be. Maybe it's a job, we go into ministry. Maybe we go into a business that has us dealing with other people in a business relationship who are Christians. Um, I think about preaching school environments, or whatever situation you're put into, where all of a sudden you get a peek behind the curtain, if you will. And and I have seen on more than one occasion someone come out of a situation like that bitter and cynical because they were disillusioned, they were disappointed. This never should have happened with fellow Christians, and this person didn't pay their bills, this person gossips, they saw things that so disappointed them, and or they were hurt by other people in ministry, and then it taints how they view fellow Christians. And I understand, and I'm not trying to disregard any hurt or disappointment or letdown. That does happen, and it does hurt. There's no denying it. Jesus talks about that. It's gonna happen. How many of the letters talk about our relationship with fellow Christians and learning to forgive and learning to put up with?
There.
Because we're humans and we're gonna disappoint each other. But man, so many times you hear about people who make statements like, I had better friends when I was in the secular world than I did, in ministry. And it's sad. And I think that that's Satan getting into the heart and making you say something that absolutely is not true. That it hurt more when things like that happen because you don't expect it from Christians. But we're still people. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to let people down. We're going to hurt people. People are going to say things against you, and we have to be careful that we protect our heart against any kind of worldly spirit to then come in and have this cynical mindset toward God's people.
Mhm.
I think other people can see that, sense that, they hear your speech, they hear your words, and you're just repelling people from Christ when you allow that bitterness and suspicion against Christian people in general to take over. Did that make sense? I think I worded that very clumsily.
Well, it's easy to get disillusioned, but
Yeah.
we're pretty hypocritical if we are disillusioned by people who are human, because we are human and we're doing the same thing to others, whether we realize it or not. So, um,
Yes.
I think it's something to aspire to not be that way, but we're going to fail because we're human.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Um, so love like Jesus. Think about how many times, if anybody could have become cynical and disillusioned, he came to save and serve.
Hmm.
And look what he put up with, betrayal, disappointments, people misunderstanding him, even the ones closest to him, all the things that he experienced. And he still loved sacrificially and forgave completely. Um, Another way to love instead is to quit viewing the world through your phone. We had won't spend a lot of time on that because we had a recent episode on, step away from the phone a little bit. But sometimes I think our perception is skewed just because most of it comes from what we see on our phones. This is my view of the world. This is my view of the church. This is my view of fellow Christians, the things that I'm seeing here, things people have posted or written. And so I'm formulating my own mindset toward people in general or the church because of what I'm seeing on my phone. And I say, step away from the phone and go out and be with real people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, go outside. The trees and things that you're seeing are real. They're not AI. Go to your own church family. The people that you're seeing there are real. When people make blanket statements like, well, the church's problem is this, I always want to go, really? Because, like, have you been able to visit all of them?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's pretty incredible that you know all of that
and
about all
spend
those people.
spend quality time, enough quality time to figure that
Uh-huh.
out, but or do you just know it from your own congregation and maybe what you've seen on your phone? I mean, just if you start feeling this cynical attitude toward people in general, step away from your phone and look people in the face around you and invest in there. Get your view of God's people there and um worry about your own church family. And if it is a problem in your own church family, well, you're a part of that church family. So that means you can contribute to fellowship and unity and warmth and all the things that should be a part of it. So quit viewing the world through your phone, I think will help. And then shut down gossip was the last one that I had. And because you had mentioned already that this is something that we can so easily pick up from other people. Do the conversations in your circle involve questioning the motives or actions of other people?
Hmm.
And so conversations that hint at, maybe it's not out and out said, but enough hints are dropped that some suspicion is there and questioning the actions or motives of others. Well, either walk away from it or turn that conversation around, and say something positive about the victim there. Leviticus 19:16, God said to his people, "You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people." And I just think about how easy it is to do that, in our little groups. We also know that God hates it because it's in that list in Proverbs 6. I think a couple of things kind of hint at this very thing when it talks about a false witness who spreads lies, and another one is one who sows discord among brethren. And do we not see that with suspicions, aspersions, the labeling? It's causing discord.
Hmm.
And Jesus prayed for unity right before he went to the cross. This breaks his heart.
Yeah.
Breaks his heart. We have to nip it in the bud. We should have no part of it whatsoever. Do not engage. Do
How do
not
you?
give whoever is doing it an audience.
Yeah. How do you do that? I mean, I've seen some people do it before where they kindly will say, "Hold on, I just really rather not be part of that." But for those of us who are, I mean, I have a hard, that to me is a little bit confrontational, even though it's very kind.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a hard time with this. I have a hard time shutting it down. And
Mm-hmm.
what I want to do is just turn around and walk away, but that's rude. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's non-confrontational in a way, but at the same time it is. So how do you shut that down? How do you? And maybe I should have asked you that before you started recording to be
Are you talking
prepared.
about in conversation with
Yeah,
someone?
yeah,
Yeah, I think you could. I mean, they're not, whoever is leading that conversation, you could insert something positive to, and do it in a gracious, non obnoxious way.
mhm,
You don't have to appear self righteous about it, but you
right,
could gently insert something into the conversation that either changes the direction of the conversation or hints enough at, well, that's not really a quite fair thing to say about somebody else, that done graciously enough gives them the opportunity to
Yeah.
catch themselves. You don't have to, I don't think you have to make a thing out of it unless they're just not picking up the hint. And then I would just walk away. It may be rude, but do you want to be a part of that?
No, no.
You know, and
And
if
that's
it's something that we're seeing online, walk away. Don't give them an audience. Don't engage. Unfollow if you have to.
yeah. My dad would say you don't have to go, you don't have to attend every fight you're invited to.
Yeah.
And I can do that online. Like if it's a conversation, a text or an email or a message, whatever, I can turn it around and say, what, can you look at it this way? It's just harder for me to do in person. And I need to be better about it because, we don't need to be involved in that. I just need to be able to say, I'm not comfortable with this or whatever it is. I
Mhm.
need ways to escape that because I don't want to be part of it.
I would just come up with some excuse. If they're casting some kind of shade on someone's character or actions or whatever, say, yeah, I know they've had a rough week,
Yeah.
and then change the subject.
Hmm.
And that way you're not going, why are you talking about them? But just
Yeah.
insert a little, yeah, I think I've heard that she hasn't been sleeping well, and then just move on. Just you can do it in a way that's not.
I have once or twice when my dander was raised about something, I was proud of myself. I thought anyway. When someone said something about someone, I said, "Well, how did they respond when you went and talked to them?"
Hmm.
Because I mean, that's what they're supposed to do. And
Yeah.
most they're gonna, well, I haven't talked to them. Anyway, I think I'm chasing a rabbit. Sorry, but
Yeah. No, it's a good question. It's a good question. I think you got to get into the nitty gritty. You can't just say, here's what to do. Well, yeah,
yeah,
okay. How?
how? Yeah,
How do we do that
help me,
exactly?
help me, help me.
Yeah. And then I was just gonna share a couple more things that was highlighted in this article. And he talks about how we struggle with this when we have the mindset of we're more bothered about other people's perceived sins against us than our own sins against a holy God.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're looking for, you know. We're looking at everybody else
Hmm.
instead of leaving them to the creator and instead of worrying about our own heart. Um, he said, the spirit of the age assumes the worst of a neighbor's confusing comment, but the spirit of a Christian assumes the reasonable best, interpreting the neighbor how they want to be interpreted. The spirit of the flesh is wronged by a church member and gossips or comments passive aggressively online. But the spirit of a Christian checks for logs in his own eye. Um, he talks about suspicion choking out laughter, and distrust destroys friendships. And that one of the lines that he made was that if we're more Christ like in spirit, we are absolutely going to glow because we do live in a cynical world. I mean, we can see that. And that's why we have to fight it because it's all around us. And so when we do fight it and we have a Christ like spirit instead, we're going to glow. We're going to stand out and we're going to be shining the light for Christ. He shared a Charles Spurgeon quote. It would be better to be deceived 100 times than to live a life of suspicion.
Mm.
And then the article author said, doesn't this strike you as true? Better to miss the possible offense in an email, the possible insult in someone's actions, the possible slight in the text. But more often than not, it's better to overlook. And then he gives like possible insensitivity, sexism, racism, rudeness, whatever. Even where it could exist. Where sin is apparent, things may change, but suspicion would have us confront possible sins with the same severity as obvious ones. Um, and then he said, we really have been freed by Christ to hope the best and assume the best of others' intentions and to leave the secret sins of others to their Creator. This is a love that covers a multitude of sins. This is that glory of a godly person who passes over affronts. And then he shared Proverbs 19:11, good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. And then the last thing I'll share, he said, "How am I treated? How am I being understood? How am I being seen and known? That's not the business of a Christian life. How people speak about us behind our backs, whether or not they like us, it's too groveling a thing to consume the born again life."
That's
Isn't
pretty
that
good.
good?
I have to think about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I highlighted all that.
Mhm. To let it marinate. One thing
Yeah.
that I wrote down was that trust and love and grace and forbearance, all those things happen slowly. And
Yes.
it really shouldn't, but it just does because it's anti or unhuman and it's just not
Yeah.
like us as humans. But it
Hmm.
will happen. It will increase with intent and desire. And when we recognize that we want to be that way, but on the other hand, suspicion and distrust, that's like, instant. If we don't train our hearts and minds, then that's our instant reaction is to be
Hmm.
distrustful, sarcastic, or suspicious, and all of those negative, icky things that we don't want to be. So we have to be intentional. We always come back to that word, intentional.
We do. And I think that's a good way to put it. We have to train ourselves because I don't think we wake up and say, "Today I'm going to be suspicious." We probably don't catch it in ourselves. We can see it in other people, and we just don't. It's not like we want to be suspicious. That's not fun,
Yeah.
but we can so easily be suspicious, and it's not right. So just having a conversation about it so we can be more aware, catch ourselves, ask your friends to help you,
Mhm.
that you'll help catch each other when you start sounding cynical, especially about fellow Christians or your spouse. If you're having a problem being suspicious of your spouse, don't hang around people that talk bad about their spouse. I mean, there are things that we can do to kind of help train having more of a Christ-like spirit instead of a worldly spirit along
Absolutely.
these lines.
Yeah. Love it.
All right.
You want to try?
Anything else before we shift gears a little bit?
That's
No?
all.
All right. What are you guys doing about dinner?
It's Wednesday, but,
Yeah.
and I meant to share last week, and we ran out of time, so I'm going to share it this week. I have it in my fridge. We're not going to have it tonight. We'll have it tomorrow. It's the London broil recipe that Brian and Shannon made for us last week, and they got the recipe from Bon Appetit magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's London broil. It's that cut of meat, the London broil, and then you marinate it with garlic, olive oil, balsamic vinegar, and I love anything with balsamic vinegar.
Me too.
Soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, freshly ground black pepper. It has baking soda in the marinade, which I've never seen that before.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it gives a reason in the recipe. I'll link the recipe next week, but it has something to do with proteins and all that kind of stuff. And so you marinate it, and you also put some butter in it too. And it's a
Butter makes
very
everything
quick.
better.
Yeah. So you sear it on your cast iron skillet on your stovetop, and then finish it off in the oven. And it was really really good. I mean, I love flank steak that's been marinated and fajitas that have been
Mm.
marinated. I always like marinated meat, and I think probably lime might be good in that too.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
lime is always good. But that, and then I also have a recipe for, this is kind of weird, and I'm surprised that I like it, but an English pea salad. It's Pioneer Woman's English pea salad, and it's
Huh.
got bacon in it. It's peas and bacon, and I'm sure it has mayonnaise, and I probably will substitute Greek yogurt. But anyway, that's going to be on the menu for tomorrow night.
Yum. That sounds good. We are having leftovers today. I made a beef and potato soup a couple of days ago. So Neil and I are just going to have those leftovers tonight. But I did try a new bread recipe that is you know how Irish soda bread isn't a yeast bread and the only leavening agent is baking soda?
Mhm.
So it's similar to that, except it's baked in a loaf and not a round like Irish soda bread. And it's called a heritage loaf, and it has any kind of whole grain. So I used freshly milled spelt, but any kind of whole grain. But then it also has wheat germ. It has steel oats, whole grain wheat germ, steel oats, ground flaxseed, a little bit of all-purpose flour, and then you mix that up with baking soda and then some buttermilk.
Hmm.
And then you put it in a loaf pan and you create like a little shallow well down the center of it. And then you sprinkle the top of it with sesame seeds and pumpkin seeds.
Yum.
And then you bake it. And I was so surprised because I fixed it and I was explaining to Neil and I was like, this isn't a yeast bread, it's more like a quick bread and it's probably going to taste really healthy.
In other words, not very good.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting it to taste kind of like cardboard, really,
Hmm.
but I loved the recipe has all the reasons why all of these ingredients are so very good for you. And but it was good. And it almost there's nothing sweet in it whatsoever, but it kind of something in there is kind of giving it a natural sweetness. So it's like feel good bread all the way. It tasted good and it's good for you. So I'll share the recipe for all you healthy food types.
How long did it take?
Takes an hour to bake it. Actually, it takes longer than that because you cook it at one temperature for 10 minutes and then you lower the temperature and you bake it for another hour.
Okay. Sounds
But
good to me.
compared to the yeast bread world or sourdough world, that's really fast to get
Yeah.
a healthy loaf of bread on the table.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not as fast as a cornbread or a something like
No.
that, but
Yeah,
still
no.
quicker than a lot of them. Sounds good.
Mm-hmm,
I'll
mm-hmm.
try it.
Yeah. Do you have something good for us?
I do. And I've had it for months and did not use it until just this week. So on my floor here in my office, there's a stain. There was a stain. And I don't know what it was because this office used to be the game room for the boys, and there was always teenagers in here with spaghetti, and that's never a good mix. So it bugged me because I couldn't cover up the stain with any furniture. It was just kind of in the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
floor. So I was just gonna get after it with some elbow grease, and so I looked up how to get rid of an old stain. So it was a little bit of hydrogen peroxide and dish soap, but I was gonna like scrub it with a sponge, the hard side of the sponge. And then it dawned on me that I bought one of these things for each of my daughters-in-law, and I think they came in 2 packs. So I had four, so I kept one. Thought I'm gonna get that thing out and use it. So it's called a Hodo wand cordless spin scrubber, and
Hmm.
it's it's this little thing here, and it spins different speeds. Now I got to turn it off, but it's stiff. So
Mm-hmm.
and it worked. I got the stain out, the old stain. So, and then I didn't really have to scrub. I
Wow.
just pushed it down, and it comes with that, and um, just has some. This is more like a little spongy, scrubby thing, like the backside of a
Mm-hmm.
sponge. Anyway, I think you can. I got this at Costco, I think, but I'm sure you can get it on Amazon or somewhere like that. But man, it was something that I think you could scrub your bathtub with if you need to scrub your bathtub, or just like my little carpet floor stain. It came out. So a Hodo wand.
Hodo. Somebody bring me the Hodo.
Yeah, Hodo wand, a cordless spin scrubber, cleaning master
It
for
look
every nook and cranny.
Yeah, it looks like a nook and cranny because it's small enough. It looks like it would get around your bathroom sink faucets and
It's
mhm.
showing the grout on your shower.
Oh
I
yeah.
never really do scrub the grout. I probably should, but
Mhm.
anyway, that's my
Mhm.
something good for you.
Okay, so mine is a movie that we just watched that was really good. Disclaimer, it is not a Christian movie.
Mhm.
So I just heard my husband sigh upstairs. I think he wanted me to hear that. He's like,
Remind me to
wrap
tell you
it up.
something later.
Okay, wrap it up. Literally, I just heard him go.
We haven't even been going for an hour. He ought to be used to this.
Okay, so anyway, so it's the new Kevin James movie. Have you seen it
Yeah,
advertised? Solo
Solomio.
Mio. We
Yes.
rented it the other night, and it is so cute. If there is language in it, I didn't pick up on it. I'm not saying there isn't.
Yeah.
I
I
just
don't know.
missed it. And there is a scene where after, something sad happens to him, somebody says, we need to go out for a drink. And he says, I don't drink. And he ends up drinking anyway. And of course does something dumb and foolish. But it was so cute. It was really, really good. So that's my something good for you. If you're a movie person, check out Solo Mio.
If you belong to the Angel app or whatever, you can watch it for free.
Mhm.
You don't have to rent it, but you have to belong to it, so you have to pay. I mean, you're paying for it one way or another. But we
Yeah.
joined, got a membership to Angel, So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we
really
looked into that, but we ended up just renting it.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Cool. I
All
like it.
right. Good conversation. And not necessarily an easy one, but a necessary one. And Carla, until next time.
Keep looking up.
All right. Love you, friend.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.